Thank you. Now I know I'm home. Hi, I'm Sue. I'm a very grateful member of the Al-Anon family groups because today I love an alcoholic. And my recovery date is May the 11th, 1976, and I know that's my recovery date because I laid down my knife. And I want to thank you for inviting Keith and I to come together. We always have a lot of fun together. He is so much fun. He's my entertainment today. The other day, he was fixing himself a smoothie for breakfast, and it splattered all over the counter, and he started wiping it up. But it had run down the front of the cabinet, and I said, are you going to wipe that off too? He said, no, I thought you would. And I said, no, your mother doesn't live here. And he said, well, shoot, I was going to ask her to go to lunch with me. It's like I can't ever stay mad at him. He's so funny. Yeah, but it's so good. Thank you, Al, and the committee for inviting us. It's like coming home. Keith and I got a lot of our teachings from the long-timers in Texas, and forever be grateful for that. We have couples, in our home group. We have a Saturday morning meeting that we copied from Fort Worth, and Jimmy Williams. When we were here, Betty was so sweet, Betty B, last night. She showed us the album from 1986 when we were here. Keith had hair, and he was so cute. He looked like Burt Reynolds. No, I'm not going to say that. So, anyway, I showed him at the room how grateful I am. So it's really fun. And we have a lot of young couples in our home group, and I've seen a lot of young AA couples here this weekend, and you're enjoying yourself and you're having fun, and AA couples together, two alcoholics that live together. You know how you can tell that two alcoholics are on their second date? There's a U-Haul in the driveway. And the other day I went to get my nails done, and the gal that does my nails, she does a great job. She puts the gel on them so they stay sparkly. And she got a phone call while she was doing my nails, and she hung up. I'd heard her say a few things, and she was laughing. And she said, this girl just called me, and I did her nails last week, and I put gel on her nails so they'd be sparkly. And she called me, and she said, they aren't sparkly, they're dull. And I said, go get some alcohol and put it on a cotton swab and wipe them off. You've got lotion and stuff on them, and it'll make them shine again. And the girl said, oh, good. Should I get vodka or tequila? I thought, uh-oh. So there's all kinds of signs around everywhere. And it's good to see Karen here this weekend to do the next indicated thing, and we share in your sorrow. Her and Don came to California last year. We invited them to come because we was having our 50th wedding anniversary party, and they came and shared there. And we're so grateful they did. This year we had 51 years. And we ask them because they're a good example of a married couple. In California, you don't have a whole lot of those. We're antiques. So, anyway, it's not the norm to be that way anywhere, not just in the program, anywhere. A lot of people want to give workshops on relationships in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they've been married 5-6 times. So where's the hope? Oh, there's another one coming. But we have fun, and about 8 years ago we got a home in Las Vegas, and we're back and forth between Las Vegas and Yorba Linda, California. And I'd gone to a meeting with Keith, and this lady sitting in one of those scooter wheelchairs raised her hand as a newcomer. It was her first day clean and sober. And so I went over to her. Nobody was talking to her, so I went over to her after the meeting, and I said, so you hit a bottom finally, huh? And she said, yeah, I did. I said, what was your bottom? And she said, I was driving down Las Vegas Boulevard in my scooter, and I got a DUI. And I started laughing, and she didn't think that was very funny. But you hear everything, you know? And I just love alcoholics because they do things that other people only think, you know? So we have a good time today. But I knew nothing about alcoholism when I came to this program. I did not know what it was. I was in a so-called normal family. My dad worked in the oil fields, and I don't have to explain what that was when I'm in Texas. And I lived in a trailer house, and I don't have to explain what that is either. And we moved all over Texas, Oklahoma Panhandle, and western Kansas, and I never felt like I belonged anywhere. I'd go 5-6 schools in 1 year, and I never felt like I belonged. And when I forget how old I was, but I was starting, so I was about in the 7th grade. My parents moved to a little town called Perryton, Texas, and we stayed there, and that became my hometown. But I never felt like I belonged because I wasn't born and raised there. And so I was always felt out of sorts. And my father passed away, and that left my mother and younger brother and I at home together. My older sister had run off and got married, and so there was just the three of us there. My mom started dating and after a while, and I hated her for that because I'd been Daddy's little girl, and I thought she was being very disloyal to my daddy. And I started looking for love in all the wrong places, and I ended up in San Antonio, Texas, in the Nunwed Mother's Home. And I stayed there for a period of time, and I gave a child up for adoption because back then you didn't keep your child, and you were a bad girl. And so I was a bad girl. And so I went back home, and I didn't like the kids that I was hanging with because they were acting too immature. And my mom said, you want to go with us? And I said, where are you going? She said, I'm going to Guyman to a conky town. And I said, okay, because I'd never been to one. And so we got there and we walked in. Oh my gosh, it was smoky. You couldn't see across the room. The music was loud. People were fighting and dancing, and it's, yeah, I'm home. I love the whole atmosphere. And I watched this cowboy move the room, and everywhere he was going, he was starting a fight, and I thought it took a lot of courage for him to do that. And pretty soon he came running past me, and he said, honey, let me know when the fight's over, and he went into the woman's restroom to hide. And when the fight was over, I said, okay, cowboy, you can come out now. And he asked me for the last dance, and usually it's a slow dance where you get ready, you rub up against each other, get ready to go home. And it was a fast dance. Nick kept getting faster and faster and faster. And what I know today, I look back on that, and he got me in the fast lane downtown right now, and I loved it. And he called me the next day and asked me out. My mom said, no, you're not going to go with him. He's older than you, he's been married before, and he's in trouble all the time. And I thought, oh, good. And so I came to pick me up, and I answered the door, and there's no car. And I go, now, wait a minute. You know, guys pick me up in cars when he said, well, you don't understand. I've had my driver's license taken away forever. And I told him my car, and I said, no problem. You know. And so I got him in my car, and I knew what to do. I took him to the drive-in movie, and we sat there, and we watched the movie. And I thought, whoa, this must be what it's like to be with a more mature man. And I noticed that he has a six-pack of beer sitting between his legs, that he was more interested in me. And that set up that obsession, that I wanted to be number one in that man's life more than anything. And we started dating, and he'd come over to my house on Wednesday nights, and we'd watch TV together. And my girlfriends were saying that their boyfriends would come over and watch TV with them in the middle of the week, and that they would kiss and smooch on the couch, and the boyfriend would dote over them, and they just had a great evening of romance. And my boyfriend was coming over, and he was falling asleep. I did not understand pass out. And it made me angry, because you don't know who I am. The arrogance that I had was unreal. And I'll show you. And at that time, Keith had long hair and a long beard. And I went and got a razor, and I shaved half his head and half his face off. And he woke up, and he kissed me goodnight, and he left. And the next night, he came back to pick me up for a date, and he looked the same. And we'd drag Main Street. We'd go down Main Street this way, and he's clean shaven and looks good. And we'd go down this way, and he had long hair and a long beard. And he'd say, people in this town think I'm two-faced anyway. And I would just laugh. It was so funny. And he got a draft notice, and we decided we couldn't live without each other, so we ran off to Amarillo and got married. And he took his physical the next weekend, and Uncle Sam didn't want him, so I got to keep him. And we moved to Stillwater, Oklahoma, so Keith could finish school. And he'd gone to school for many years, but he'd never stayed put long enough to get a degree. And I knew that I had what it took to make him stay put. And so we stayed there. And shortly after we got there, we had our little girl, Simone. And I remember looking at that little girl and thinking, thank God she's a girl. Because Keith was a drunk, his dad was a drunk, and his granddad was a town drunk. I did not know that alcoholism doesn't care what sex, color, race, or creed you are. It takes you to the gates of insanity and hell, and you don't even have to drink booze to get there. Alcoholism is a family disease, and I knew nothing about it. And we'd go to honky-tonks there. We went this one called The Hill, where all the Aggies went, and I'd give him the lecture before we'd leave the house. Do not get in a fight tonight. And he'd say, okay. And so we'd be there and we'd be dancing, and I'd put him over in a booth. I'd have to go to the restroom, and I'd put him in a booth, and I'd go, stay. And I read about the big thumb this morning in our books, and I thought, not me. And I put him over there in the booth, and I came out, and there's a fight in the middle of the dance floor, and I'm going, darn him. He will not mind. And I'd make my way through all those guys, and somebody'd be swinging, and they'd hit me, and I'd fall on the ground, and they'd go, where did she come from? And they'd pull me up, and I'd look around, and he's still in the booth. And he'd go, why do you fight like that at these places? And so he finally got his degree. It took him 4 years to get a 2-year degree, and I took all the credit for it. And he came home one day, and he said, babe, I want to move to California. And I said, no, I'm not going to California. It's too wild and crazy in California. I'll never raise kids in California. He said, baby, you don't understand. In California, you can walk into a restaurant and order a cocktail. You will never have to drink out of a paper sack again. And they dress up, and they toast, and they have wine with their dinner. And he said, a lady like you belongs out there. And I'm going, yeah. And so he hurried up and built this blue box and put it on wheels. We put all of our junk in there. And we hooked it on the back of the station wagon. We had our German Shepherd and Cat and Simone in the back of the station wagon. And we started out for California. Now, he had to go by Oklahoma City and get a prescription filled in a baggie at midnight. And I ignored that part of the disease, because it's like, I'll be married to a drunk, but I'll never be married to a junkie. And today, I know, and Donna talked about it last night, I know alcohol's a drug, because it does things to you. And I'm so grateful that in Al-Anon, they told me to read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love the doctor's opinion, because it talks about the phenomena of craving. And I believe the non-drinker needs to understand that. I needed to understand my husband can't take a drink. And it sets up that phenomenon of craving. He can't have one drink and just quit like I can, because I don't care if I have any more. I know that you're supposed to stop drinking when your eyebrows feel stiff. And he would never do that. So we headed out for California. And we headed out for California, and we get out there. It took us 30 days. It should take 3, because it depended on what he drank and what he took as to how far we went. And there's days we just stayed put. And we'd wake up in the morning, and I'd look at Keith to see how he was, so I'd know how I was supposed to feel and how Simone was supposed to act. And we were all so crazy in that car. A German Shepherd would stand behind the driver's seat and chase big trucks to the back and hit the back of the window, fall down on the cat, and they'd have a dog and cat fight, and they'd be on top of Simone, and she'd start crying and screaming. I'd turn around and start slapping and bitching, and we did that one day at a time for 30 days. And it's called alcoholism. And we get to California, and he goes to work for an oil company, and he was never going to do that anymore. And he'd be gone for days. And I'd be looking out that window, and a little girl would come up to me and jerk on me and say, "Mommy, please help me with my homework." And I'd say, "No, I'm busy. Get away from me." Because, you see, she was interfering with my obsession. That's all I could think about is, where is he, who's he with, and how much is he drinking? Because I knew he was always doing one of those 3 things. And he came home one night, and he said, "Let's go out to dinner." And I said, "Oh, great," because I've been waiting, because I wanted to be a lady. I wanted to be somebody. And I hadn't been in places that had class and cocktails and that kind of thing. And if we could just do that, we'd be okay. And so we go to this restaurant, and everybody was dressed up really nice. And they seated us, and they asked us, "Would you like a cocktail before dinner?" And I said, "You bet." And they came over, and they set those drinks in front of us, and we ordered a Shirley Temple for Simone. We didn't leave her out at all. And Keith picked up his glass, and he said, "Let's toast to the good life." Oh, my God, this is everything I ever wanted. We're normal. This is the way it's supposed to be. And we toasted to the good life. And then he started ordering 10 to my 1. And I knew exactly how many he'd ordered. And I watched the people in that place, and they were drinking out of these long stem crystal glasses. Now, growing up in a trailer house, you don't have china and crystal and the fine things of life. And I thought, if I just have that, I'll be okay. I'll be somebody. Because I was always judging my insides with your outsides. If I can just feel the way you look, I'll be okay. And these people had these glasses, and they were swishing it, and they were sniffing it, and I wanted to be like that. And so the waiter came over, and he said, "Would you like wine with your dinner?" And I said, "You bet." And he took our order, and he came back, and he set those pretty glasses down in front of us. And he poured Keith just a little bit and said, "I want you to taste it, see if it's okay." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He drank stuff in Oklahoma that had things floating in it. Pour mine. And they poured mine. And I swished my glass, and I sniffed it. I didn't know. I had no clue what I was doing. But I wanted to be like them. And I was great. And I felt wonderful until I look across the table at Keith, and he's drinking out of the carafe. And I just yell at him, "What are you doing?" And Simone says, "Not here." And she slides under the table. And he said, "I'm drinking. What do you think I'm doing?" And then I see the waiter over there, and I holler at him, "Come here, come here, come here right now." And I'm yelling at him. And he comes over at the table, and I don't ever want to forget this, because we never want to forget who we are and where we came from. And he looked at me. I said, "Where's our food? Bring us our food." And he said, "I'm sorry, but you're not going to eat here." And I said, "Why not?" He pointed right at me. He said, "Because you don't know how to act." And I'm going, oh, my gosh. And we're walking out of that restaurant. We're being escorted out. And we can never go back because Keith's talking to everybody in sign language. And it's like, you know. And I get home, and I get right in his face. "Don't you ever act like that again. Don't you ever do that again." And he said, "Sue, get out of my face." And I took one step closer. and I'm just giving him all the stuff that I can think. And he said, "Sue, if you don't get out of my face, I'm going to hit you." And I take one step closer, and he hits me, and the knockdown, drag-out fight's on. I'll show you. And he has me on the bed, and he's choking the living tar out of me. And I'm thinking, oh, my gosh, I'm going to die right here. And I look up at Keith, and he's looking down at me with all the intensity he had. And it dawned on me, he's not thinking about nothing but me. I am number one. And so I started those fights all the time. And Keith being from Texas, he always carried a gun, and it's like, I'll show you. And I picked up my butcher knife, and I started fighting back with that butcher knife. And he'd stick his gun right on my nose, and he said, "Sue, shut up, or I'm going to shoot you." And I'd put my knife right in his stomach, and I'd say, "You go first." And he'd go, "What do you mean, me go first? If I shoot you, you're dead." And I said, "I know, but when the bullet hits me, it'll knock me backwards, make the knife go forwards, and I'll get you, and we'll both die at the same time, so go for it." And he'd look at me, and he'd say, "You're crazy." And I was. He came home one night, and he passed out on the bed on his stomach 10 minutes into a 2-hour conversation. You don't ignore me when I'm talking to you. And I took that butcher knife, and I just started stabbing him all over his back, saying, "God, please help me do away with this." I didn't know that this that I was talking about, was the insanity of alcoholism. And then I saw his back starting to bleed, and I go, oh, my God, this is the man I love. What am I doing? What am I doing? And I laid down, and I cried myself to sleep. Next morning, Keith woke up, and he goes, "Oh, my gosh, something's wrong with my back." And I said, "Well, let me see." And he turned around, and I said, "You've been drinking all that rock gut whiskey. You've broken out with acne of the back. But I'll help you, babe. I'll get the rubbing alcohol, and I'll take care of it." Oh, my God. Oh, my God. And you go from one thing to another. And I told the girls the other day, I'd tell this story today. And it's like in the big book when it talks about alcoholics switching from scotch to brandy. We switch from going to nice restaurants. We're going to go camping. We're going to go camping now. We need a camper, and we're going to have dirt bikes, and we're going to have fun camping. And so, Keith, we go, and we get this overhead camper on our pickup, and I go out, and I get it stocked with all the pots and pans and the stuff that we need in there, you know. And then Keith doesn't want to go camping. He's tired. Well, he's drunk. He didn't want to go camping. And I said, "We'll go without you." He said, "You've never driven a pickup with a camper before." And I said, "I don't need to drive." And I got an extension cord, and I ran it out to that camper. And I said, "Okay, Simone, we're going to camp this weekend." And so Simone and I camped in the driveway. And the neighbor kids would come over, and they'd say, "Simone, you come play with us?" She goes, "No, I can't. We're out camping. We can't go camping." And we were crazy. And finally, Keith came out on Sunday because he smelled breakfast, and he was hungry by Sunday. And I said, "Well, if you'll act nice, you can come in and have breakfast with us in our new camper." He said, "I'll be nice, I promise. I promise." And we all sat in our driveway, and we had breakfast, and then we had to clean up the camper. We got home about noon on Sunday. And so he came home one day, and he said, you know, he had heard about the wild burro races in Nevada, in Beatty, Nevada, and didn't want to go there, and we'd go camping there. And I said, "Yeah, let's go there." And so we went there, and it was sponsored, the wild burro races was sponsored by Jim Beam and Fran Star Ranch in Nevada. Oh, my God. That was a drunk weekend. And when we'd come from Oklahoma out to Texas, it's during the time when you wore wigs. And I got in this beautiful, long, blonde wig. And that way I'd look good when we go camping. I'm going to wear my wig when we go camping, and I'm going to look good all weekend. And nobody can say, you look like you've been camping. Not this chick. Yeah, I'm going to look good all the time. And so we're in the camp, we go Beatty, and we find a camping spot, and the guy that owns the camping spot, this little baby cats running around, little kittens, and he tells us, leave those kittens alone, they're wild. And he told Simone they'll scratch you all up if you try to pick them up, so just leave those cats alone. And so, okay, and so we're doing our deal, and so we get ready to go to bed that night, and it's all hot outside. And there's a bed up over the camper part, up over the pickup part, and then the table made out into a bed. And he says, it's too hot, I can't lay up there. He said, I'm going to lay down here on the table bed. And I said, okay, Simone and I'll sleep up there. So Simone and I were up there, and we'd sleep. And we'd left the back door open to the camper because it was so hot. And we're laying up there, and we're asleep, and all of a sudden, all this fur's in my face. And I scream, and I grab it, and I throw it out the camper door, and Keith grabs his gun, and he's going, and everybody starts coming, what happened? And I said, there was a cat in here, and Keith shot the cat. It was a wild cat, and I looked down, and it's my wig. My wig had got crazy, twisted, and I grabbed that wig, and I jerked it on my head, and I said, I look good. Don't you dare shoot my wig one more time. And that was our successful camping trip. I am so grateful I got to go through all the things that I went through. Our life would have been so boring. Living with an alcoholic is never boring. Yeah, and as the disease progressed, we'd have those fights, and Keith get drunk. We got in a fight one night, and Keith left, and he didn't come home, and that wasn't his deal. And so I was furious that he didn't come home that night, and I'd say, God, please just kill him out there. Just let him die. Let him be in a car wreck and let him get killed. Please don't let anybody else get hurt. And I'm thinking one more time, what's wrong with me? This is the man I'm supposed to love, and I'm wishing him dead. And I cry myself to sleep. I wake up the next morning, and he's still not at home. And I go in, and I get Simone. I say, come on, Simone, we're going to go find your dad. And I didn't have a clue where I was going to look for him out there. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack in California. And I thought, well, I'll go down to Orange, which was about 14 miles south of where we lived. And I thought, I'll go down there because there was an after-hours club we used to go to down there. And I thought, I'll start out there and I'll go from there. And so we was driving down there, and we got 2 blocks from that place, and I looked over, and there's Keith's pickup over there, parked on the lawn of this house with these other bikes. And by then, he was becoming a biker. I hated it. I slashed my wrist the first bike he bought because I wasn't going to be married to a biker. And I did it the wrong way, and I had to keep doing that to make it bleed so he'll feel sorry for me. And he cooked chili, and my mother had come over, and she goes, what are you doing? He said, have a bowl of chili. I'm watching your daughter commit suicide. She'll die in about 4 or 5 days doing this. And so when I saw his pickup down there with those motorcycles on that lawn, I'll show him. I'll show him. He can't treat us this way, and he will not be a biker. And so I got the keys to his pickup out of my purse, and I drove his pickup 2 blocks from that house, and I walked back to my car. I drove my car 2 blocks in front of the pickup. I walked back the pickup, and I drove the pickup 2 blocks in front of the car. It only took me 4.5 hours to get both of those vehicles home, but I did it, and I felt good. And I wasn't a bad mother either. I never left Simone unattended in either one of those vehicles. She walked every step of the way with me. And we're home for a couple hours, and Keith calls, and he said, Sue, come and get me. And I said, oh, you have one of your buddies bring you home. You're over there in that house with, he goes, what are you talking about? And I said, you're in that house with all those Hells Angels. You're over there. You have one of them bring you home. He said, I don't know what house you're talking about. I'm in jail. And see, the neighbors used to call the cops all the time when we'd get in our fights and have them come there. Simone would call them, or I'd call them, and they'd come and get him, put him in jail, and I'd go write a hot check and get him out. Or I'd go to the jail and I'd see him, and I'd say, do you know where you are? Like he didn't know he was in jail, yeah. And I'd pay his bail and get him out. So I went down there. He said, I'm in jail. I said, you do not go to jail by yourself. The neighbors have to call the cops, Simone has to call the cops, or I have to call the cops. You don't just go out there and go to jail by yourself. Do you hear me? He goes, whatever, Sue, just come and get me. And so Simone and I got in the car and we drove down to Santa Ana and bailed him out with a hot check. And I got in trouble for writing hot checks. And they were all to the county. Oh, anyway. We go down there and we're leaving, and Simone says, we got to take Daddy. And I said, we're not taking Daddy. Your daddy is a no-good, rotten son of a gun. He doesn't love you, and he doesn't love me, or he wouldn't act this way. If he loved us, he wouldn't do this. He wouldn't hurt us. We wouldn't fight. He wouldn't drink like that. You see, I'm so grateful that I read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and found out that alcoholism is an illness. And that my husband was sick. He wasn't mean and crazy. Alcohol did that to him. That's why I'm powerless over alcohol, because I hated the man for what he was doing. I wasn't hating what alcohol did to him. And today I can say I love that man. And I still don't like what alcohol does to people. And so we get home, and we didn't take Keith. A couple hours later, the doorbell rings, and I go to the door, and there's Keith. And I had the door locked, and he said, Sue, let me in. And I said, no. You're not going to act like this and think that you can just come home and come and go, drunk all the time, you drink and all this stuff that you want to do. He said, Sue, this is Keith Drum. I live here, you know. He introduced himself to me like I didn't know who it was. And I said, if you want in, you beg. You beg. And that man got down on his knees in front of his own house and begged to get back in, robbing that man of his dignity. That's what alcoholism was doing to me, because I didn't understand. It was lack of knowledge was my dilemma. I was treating him like a bad person, not like a sick person. And we acted like that for years. I went to an attorney one time. We'd had a fight, and I fell down. He kicked me in the face, and the attorney said, and I'd been to him many times, and he looked at me and he said, oh my gosh, Sue, what happened to you? And I said, Keith and I had a fight. He said, do you fight like this all the time? And I said, no, only when he drinks. He said, do you think he's an alcoholic? And I said, I don't know what that is. And he said, it's somebody that can't quit drinking. I said, oh, I bet he is, because he drinks all the time. I've poured out booze. I've filled water up in bottles. He got drunk on water a lot. And I was telling this attorney all of that, and he said the key word to me. If you love him, why don't you take him to Alcoholics Anonymous? And I said, okay, what is that? And he said, that's a place where people go to get sober. They stop drinking. And I said, great, I will. Thank you so much. And I know he was just so happy to get me out of his office that time. And so I went home, and Keith was laying on the couch, and he was beat up. And I said, I went to an attorney again today, and he told me that if I loved you, I'd take you to this place called Alcoholics Anonymous. And he looked at me and said, with also the sincerity he had, he said, babe, I thought it would come to this. So I called a man in Alcoholics Anonymous today, and he took me over and showed me this church where there's an AA meeting in there. He said, in fact, there's one there tonight. And I said, oh, really? Good. What time does it start? He said, 8:30. And I said, we'll go. He said, we'll see. So I hurried and fixed dinner because I'd quit cooking a long time before that because our food ended up in the walls and the ceiling and stuff. But if you're going to take them someplace like that, you got to feed them. And so I fixed dinner, and Keith ate and went over and laid back down on the couch, and I hurried up and got the dishes done, and I was watching the clock, and at 8 o'clock I got my butcher knife, and I went over at the couch, and I jabbed him, and I said, "Get up." He said, "What for?" I said, "We're going to go to that Alcoholics Anonymous meeting." He said, "I don't think I want to go," and I jabbed him again, and I said, "I think you do." And he got up off the couch, got in the car, and he showed me where the AA meeting was, and we pulled up in front of that church, and I said, "What time's this meeting over?" He said, "I think it's 10 o'clock. I said, "I'll tell you something, dude. You come out of that door for 10 o'clock, I'll get you." And so I took Keith to that meeting every Monday night for 4 months, for 4 weeks, and sat in the parking lot with my butcher knife. Now, when I got to Al-Anon, you told me that I couldn't keep a drunk sober, but I did for 4 months, sitting out there with that butcher knife. The sad part is there was an Al-Anon meeting at that church at the exact same time. And I'd never heard of Al-Anon. I didn't have a clue what it was, but I hadn't gotten to the want to. I know that this program is for people who want it, not for people who need it. I needed recovery, but then just as bad as Keith did. But I hadn't hit a bottom. And if he'll just shape up, I'll be fine. And I let him go to those meetings by himself, and he got drunk immediately. Because he didn't sober up for me. He didn't sober up for the judge. I understand today that every alcoholic has to sober up for themselves, and I'm grateful that I know that. They have to hit a bottom for themselves, just like I had to hit a bottom for myself. And we went on many years with the drunkenness in our home. And it got worse, and it got more violent, and it turned on Simone. I remember one time Keith and I were fighting, and he walked away. He was tired of my stuff. And I was in that blind rage, and it's like I couldn't quit. And I turned around, there's Simone, and I'm banging her head up against the wall. And she says to me, "Mommy, I know why you're doing this. You're showing Daddy that you can act just like him." And I thought, oh my gosh, how does he know that? And we lived that way for a few more years, 4 more years. And it got worse. And Keith always had a gun, and he was always shooting things around the house and stuff, and I was always leaving. And I got to the point that one night we'd had a fight, and he turned on Simone, and he had Simone in the corner doing the things to her I'd always done to her. And I looked at him, and I guess it was like a moment of clarity. And I said, "Keith, I don't love you anymore, but I don't hate you either. I don't feel anything for you. We're done." I said, "If you want to keep drinking and become a Skid Row bum," because that's what I thought happened to drunks, and that's what you got to do. But Simone, I ain't going any further with you. And Simone and I quietly got some things together, and we left that house for the very last time. I am so grateful. We were gone for about 4 days. I don't remember those 4 days or where we were. And Simone said, "Mommy, I got to go home. I got to get some things for school." I did not know during that time that our daughter was trying out for cheerleader. That's how unconcerned I was as a mother. She didn't count. She was in the way. That's what alcoholism is to the family. And so we went back home, and we were afraid of what we'd find, because Keith's always having these guns and wanting to commit suicide and all that kind of stuff. And so we go in the house, and the house is dark, and we look around. We go in the bedroom, and he's face down on the bedroom floor. And we think he's dead, so we kick him. And he rolls over, and he looked at me, and he said, "Sue, please help." And I know this is when God came into my life, because he gave me the most important word to say to that man I could ever say. I said, no, I can't help you. If you want to help, you help yourself. That had to be God, because I couldn't say that on my own. And he got up, and he went and made a phone call. And we fought with a gun and knife one more time, because that's who we are. And the doorbell rang, and I go to the door, and there's this little shriveled up, gray-headed man, and I'm thinking, Jesus, why don't they send the big ones on these trips? And this little Jack Callahan walked into our home and into our lives. The second most important man in our life. And he did the classic 12-step call that is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He not only 12-stepped the alcoholic, but he carried the message to the family of. And he asked me to go with him to take Keith, put him in a detox, and we did. And he went back home, and he sat in the driveway with me, and he said, "You need help." And I said, no, if he quits drinking, I'll be fine. He said, "I don't think so." He said, "You are the meanest, most foul-mouthed woman I've ever met." And he said, "You need a program called Al-Anon, and it helps families." And he went in the house, and he told Simone, "If you love your daddy, you'll go to a program called AlAnon." And so Simone and I started going while Keith was in that detox. And I went to my first Al-Anon meeting. And I walked in that room, and at that time, the Al-Anon big book cover said, "Living with an Alcoholic" on it. And I went, I was home. I didn't have to lie anymore. I didn't have to make excuses. I didn't have to act like I was somebody. I didn't have to be phony. And those people talked about things that I had as secrets. And they were talking out loud about them, and they were smiling, and they were laughing. And I felt good. They understood. They understood. And so we started going to those meetings. I'm going to one Al-Anon meeting. I was going to one Al-Anon meeting a week. Keith came home. He got out and he came home. He said, "I got to go to an AA meeting every day for the rest of my life. What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to Al-Anon. Simone's going to Al-Anon. The dove's going to Alley Cat, and the dove's going to Alley Dog." And he said, "Okay." And so we started going to our meetings. I hated people. I was angry, mean, and they said I had to collect 8 hugs at every meeting. I hated that. Instead, it didn't matter. They understood, and they'd give me hugs. And I started feeling more love and more comfort in there. And I finally told, and I'd gotten that sponsor thing. They're mean. They're mean. You do this. They didn't babysit me like we do now. They go, "Oh, I don't want to do that." And we go, "Okay." But back then they go, "I don't care. This is what you do if you want to feel better." And they'd say, "If you don't want to do this, go back out and we'll promptly refund your misery." How many times have you heard somebody say that recently? And it's like, whatever. And I did exactly what they told me. And one night, I said, "I feel good in these meetings now, and I like hugging these people, and I like them hugging me, but I don't feel this way at home." And my sponsor said, "You're going to go home and you're going to hug Keith." I said, "Oh, I don't want to do that." And she said, "I don't care." And so I went home that night, and I started saying the Serenity Prayer, and I said, "God, if it's going to work, it better work tonight." And so he came home, and he's walking down the hall toward me, and I said, "Okay, God, here we go." And I put my arm around Keith, and I hugged him. He goes, "What's that for?" I said, "Just for the hell of it. They told me to do it. Don't ask me why." And I started patting him when I'd walk past him, and he'd go, But it was the touching and the hugging. And Simone and I had to work a program, and that was hard to let go of her. And I had to start... She had consequences for not doing things, and it wasn't forever anymore. It was one day at a time. My sponsor said, "You ground her for one day and one day only." And that's what we started doing. What all that started doing in our home is we started trusting each other. We started to be able to do what I said I was going to do. There were no more idle threats. And I started feeling better. My sponsor took me through the steps. I had to write every one of them. And I think it's great, the people that are sharing the steps this weekend. And, I started growing. I got involved in service. And Keith got involved in service. Simone got involved in service. And we're all going to service meetings. And it's like we go to convention planning meetings and world service, and people would argue and fuss and stuff, and then they'd hug each other and go home. And I'd think, this is how you fight legal. This is legal fighting. And and we started growing. And we've gone through this program, and Simone went to Alateen, and she made the transition into Al-Anon, and she wanted to follow a dream, and she wanted to be a model. And she went to the Orient, and she did modeling over there, and she came home, and she said, I want to go to Italy. I want to go to Milan, Italy, because that's where it's at. And we helped take her. She worked, she said, I want to work for a couple of years, save money, and then I want to go to Italy. And Keith said, okay. We said, okay. And she came home one day and said, my sponsor said, I have to start learning how to be self-supporting through my own contributions. So I need to pay rent. And she said, how much rent should I pay a month? And Keith said, whatever you can do, babe, is fine. You don't have to do this. And no, my sponsor said that I had to. My sponsor says, aren't those great words? And so she was working, and she gave Keith a check, and Keith came home one day, and he said, you know that check that Simone gave me for rent? And I said, yeah. And he said, it bounced. I said, well, we taught her well, didn't we? And it came the day she went to Milan, Italy, and we took her to LAX and put her on a plane, and we watched our baby go. And we didn't hear from her for 6 weeks. What I learned from that is there is no spot where God is not. God goes everywhere. And we get on our knees every night and we'd pray that she was safe. And when Simone got over there, she couldn't find Al-Anon, and she reached out. She called AA, and she went to an English-speaking AA meeting. And they told her where Al-Anon was. And Al-Anon was only 4 years old over there when she went there. And so she started getting involved in service and stuff. The treasurer, the secretary at the Al-Anon meeting kept the seventh tradition. Whoever got that job got to keep seventh tradition, take their vacation that year. And so she started working the traditions with them. And they didn't like her at first. And she started helping the program develop like that. She helped start Alateen over there. They didn't have Alateen. She started helping translate literature over there. She was a very successful model, but if she was here right now, she would tell you about how Al-Anon worked when she got there and what it is today. And she has some ladies that she sponsored for over 20 years that are in her life. She started a women's conference, like Woman to Woman over there. She's had me over there to share a couple of times in her women's conference. And I got to go there this year, and she's had Keith and I over there. And we love going over there. And it's we have 2 granddaughters. We let them have our 2 granddaughters. And they take very good care of our granddaughters. The oldest one's name's Nicole. And when she had Nicole and they named her Nicole, I said, what's her middle name? And she said, Dama. I said, I've never heard of that name before. Where'd you get that? And she goes, it's Fabio, her husband. Said, it's Fabio's mother's name. I said, your mother-in-law? You named her after your mother-in-law? And Simone said, yeah. And I said, oh, that's nice. I came from the South. And I said, what'd you name her that? She said, well, Mother, in Italian, Sue means up, and I'm not going around saying, where's up? You know? And so 7 years later, when they found out they was having another one, and Nicole, Simone always tells the girls she sponsors, we are either all princesses or there are none. And Nicole will tell her, you know, you're a princess, I'm the queen. And so when they, 6 years ago, found out they was going to have another little girl, Nicole said, I want to name my little sister. And they said, okay. So she went and got her princess coloring book. And she flipped through there, and she said, I want to name her this. And she named her Jasmine. And she said, I want her middle name to be Sue after Granny. So they named her Jasmine Sue. And Nicole and I have a bond that is unreal. You know, it's like they were at the beach one time, and she'd been playing with these little kids, and they'd left their sand bucket and sand toys there. And Nicole was playing with them, and this lady, her grandma came over, and she said, those are her kids' toys, and you can't have them, and I'm taking them, and blah, blah. And she flipped sand in Nicole's face. And Simone said that Nicole just jumped up and put her hands on her hips, and she said, my granny is American. And this lady said, I don't care what your granny is. These are my kids' toys, and I'm taking them. You know, that little girl never knew how we lived. But she intuitively knew that day that I could have kicked that lady's ass if I And that's the kind of bond that Nicole and I have. And 2 years ago, she started developing, and Simone said she's got a huge chest, and she's very self-conscious of her chest. And I said, can I talk to her? And she said, yeah. And so Nicole got on the phone, and I said, baby, I understand you're embarrassed by your chest. And she said, oh, bad, Granny, it's big. And I said, baby, you put your shoulders back and you stick your chest out, because that's the part of Granny that you got. And baby, we were born this way, and you be proud of it. And so she is. And I don't have any bad things to share with you. We've gone through things in recovery. Like Donna said last night, it's the good things that we go through that builds the spiritual muscles. We are who we are today because we carry the message. And when I went to Vegas, I don't know how much time I have. 5 minutes. We went to Vegas. I started going meetings there, and in my opinion, they were horrible. They were horrible. They were dumping. They were just dump meetings. Everybody just dumped. And one night I was sitting in a meeting, and I said, I was sitting there, and everybody was dumping their stuff, and it was so sick. And I said, God, I can't do this. If we're going to be here, I have to have recovery. And I remembered Arbutus O'Neill. And I were at a conference in Amarillo. And we got into one of the Al-Anon meetings, and people were dumping in that meeting, and Arbutus shot straight up, and she said, Al-Anon is not a garbage can. And she started telling people what Al-Anon was and what Al-Anon was not. And she said, so you better start sharing the experience, strength, and hope in this meeting. And I went, oh, God, I can't do that. And so I sat there for a while, and then the thought came again. And I knew it was my responsibility to carry what the long-timers had given me. And I said, okay, God, I'll do this, but help me be nice. And when it came my turn to share, I said, you know what? This isn't an Al-Anon meeting. You guys come in here every week and you dump your stuff in the ground in the middle of the room. And then I guess you just pick it up and carry it home with you because you come back next week and you just give us an update. You're getting sicker in here than you are in recovery. And I said, Al-Anon is having resentments and writing it and sharing it with a sponsor and giving it away and then coming to a meeting and sharing what the solution is. So we give newcomers hope. That's what Al-Anon is, and it ain't here. And I said, I don't care. I don't care if I pissed you off, because I know what Al-Anon is and I know what Al-Anon is not. And they, afterwards, they're Al-Anons. They came up, oh, Sue, you're so strong. We really liked what you shared. You know, Al-Anons like to be beat up. And so the next week I thought, okay, I got to go back. There was one meeting I went to that they were using that Suzanne Summers book, Women Who Love Too Much. And I went, oh, my God. And I called my sponsor. And she said, you are not the Al-Anon police. You will sit there and keep your mouth shut. And I said, they need an Al-Anon policeman over here really bad. And she said, well, it's not you. And you have to wait for God to show up in your meetings. And you carry the message and what you've been taught. And so next week I went back and I said, I got to go back. If I'm going to tell them that, I got to go back and stand up for what I believe in. I got to stand up for what I believe in. And that's how we pay back our God for giving us this way of life. I will not allow anyone to tear down my principles. I will not people please anyone and do away with my principles of recovery. I need this more than I need anything, or I will return to that ugly lady I was, and I don't ever want to go back there. And so I went back to that meeting, and the girl that was leading the meeting that night, she said, you know, I heard what Sue said last week, and tonight I want to lead on the one day at a time bench. And I said, thank you, God. And some ladies started asking me to sponsor them, and we started a God of Wanted. That's my home group in California, and they had come over to California with me a couple of times to our meetings, and they wanted to start a God of Wanted Step in Tradition study for Al-Anons in Las Vegas, and we did that. And it's called the God of Wanted in Las Vegas. And they took a lot of flack for that because in Las Vegas, the Al-Anon said you don't work the steps and traditions in a meeting. And now every meeting over there is doing it. The first meeting of the month is the step or the tradition of whatever month that is, and they started doing that. And a man came up to me the other day, and he said, Sue, I want to tell you something. You've been coming here for 8 years. And he said, some other Al-Anons and I were talking, and they said Al-Anon's not the way it was when you came here. It's changed. Everybody seems to have a sponsor now, and you have to be working the steps. And they kind of liked it the way it was before you got here. I said, thank you. I said, you go back and tell they that they give me way too much power. That this is God's program and recovery is going to happen here whether they want it or not. And I did not take that as a put down. I took it as a compliment, and I stood up to it. And they gossip about me. But I saw a sign the other day, and I think it's very important that we understand this about gossip. We don't gossip in this program. We network. So I want to thank you for this weekend. It's been wonderful. It's filled my bucket, Donna. I loved your talk and your share last night. And the young alcoholic, I forget your name, sorry. But your message was great. And today, and Dave, you're going to go through the steps. I met a lady in L.A. I spoke over in West L.A. one time, and this lady came up to me after I talked, and she said, my husband and I fight just like you. She said, I said, well, I never got, she said, he hits me all the time. And I said, well, I never got hit until I got in his face. And I said, if you don't get in his face, he won't hit you. And she said, no, he hits me all the time. In fact, he's over at his first AA meeting. Can I go get him and bring him and introduce him to you? And I said, sure. So pretty soon here she comes, and she's got this man, and she's got him by the arm, and she's leading him over to me. And she says, this is the lady that I just told you about. This is Sue. And she takes his arm and puts his hand in my hand. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, he's blind. I said, you've got to get into his face before he can hit you, because he's got to find you first. He won't hit you if you're not in his face. And she said, oh, yeah. I love newcomers. I love newcomers. They are so funny. And in Las Vegas, I love 12-step work in Las Vegas because Las Vegas is a spiritual vortex of this world. Every disease is there. Every addiction is there. And 12-step work is at an abundance. There's never a meeting that's lacking newcomers. And they're now in Vegas, the 12 and 12 meeting that they started. There's last Tuesday there was 23 women in that meeting. It started with 4. And there's 4 generations of sponsorship in that meeting. So, and the women that started that meeting aren't there anymore. So God doesn't care who he uses. He just wants it done. So I just make myself available. And I love Keith. He goes to meetings over there. He loves it. And I love him so much because of you. The first time I saw him put his arms around an alcoholic and give him a hug, I thought, there's hope for us. Without your love, we're nothing. Without you sharing your God with us, we're nothing. We love you. We can't live without you. We have a responsibility to our God to give this message away when and wherever we can, and to be an example wherever we're at. Yesterday, we started talking to a lady in a store. We thought it was a lady from Colorado, and isn't it nice to be a new grandma? And we was talking to this blonde lady in the store, and she said, well, yeah, I like being a grandma. And I said, how do you like Colorado? She goes, I'm not from Colorado. And we were nice to her even though she wasn't with our group, you know. We interviewed her and give her good thing. You're a good grandma, I bet, you know. So anyway, there is no spot where God is not. Thank you for letting us share with you. Thank you for letting us come home. Thank you for sharing your life with us.